Dr. Umberto Choi is a pulmonologist at the Cleveland Clinic. He says many teens still choose to vape, and nicotine addiction can affect their brain development. When it comes to the lungs, vaping can cause inflammation and irritation, which can lead to lung damage. It can also make asthma or any other existing lung problems worse. Dr. Choi says the e-liquid or vape juice people are inhaling may contain cancer-causing chemicals and other substances linked to lung and heart disease. The long-term health impacts of vaping are still being studied.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
Let's be honest, there's no handbook that comes with every kid that we have. And the reality right now is that many of us, when we were growing up, didn't think that vaping would even be a conversation we'd have with our kids. For some of us, it's not a conversation we'll have. But society is having a conversation, and it's directly impacting students. And what we're finding right now, specifically in the world of vaping, is that it can cause incredible harm to young people. And many of them don't even know it. Because in many parts of culture, the data isn't back yet. And for parents to have these conversations about what's happening in society can be a really dark place because of the nature of the conversations that society's having and how they're shaping our hearts and minds of our students and the young people in our congregations to love certain things. But we know that God has not called us into darkness, but He's called us into light. And He's given us understanding and reasonings to be able to stand on top of. But He's also given us a compassionate heart. And that's what Dr. Kathy is going to share with us next on the Celebrate Kids podcast in our daily segment, Facing the Dark. So let's turn now to Dr. Kathy and hear more on this topic. So Dr. Kathy, it's not really clear why, but youth in the United States, where medical marijuana is legal, report more vaping of cannabis than their peers in states where cannabis is legal for all adults, or it is completely illegal. Now, new research found that about 27% of 12th graders in medical marijuana states reported vaping cannabis compared to 19% in states that bar the drug or allow it for only adult use. So it seems like vaping is really a big trend right now. What do we need to understand about vaping, and especially vaping cannabis?
There are numerous studies that suggest that it is very dangerous for our lungs. And smoking is tremendously dangerous for the heart as the major organ, although it affects many organs. But I know of individuals who have said right to my face, oh, vaping isn't dangerous. But it is dangerous. It definitely is dangerous in the lungs. We know people who have been in ICU and have passed away, and it had to do with lung tissue and all those kinds of things. So those of us who know that that's true maybe need to get better at explaining that so that we can love people well and say, are you aware? Because my fear is that they think it's harmless. It's better than tobacco. It won't be addictive. That's not true. You can also get addicted because vaping still has the chemicals and, of course, the whole cannabis thing. Oh, my goodness. Now, I wonder if some of them vape cannabis because it is helpful. I know people who fought long and hard in the states in which they've lived to get medical marijuana for their children who are have epilepsy and other issues. And it has been life-changing for them. So I wonder if in some cases their vaping steadies them, helps with ADD, ADHD, and other kinds of issues, but maybe they can't even express that. I'm not saying they should do it if it's illegal, hello. And I'm not saying they should do it even if it's helpful because it will have long-standing negative results for the lungs, if nothing else. But I think we need to understand that it's not harmless. And we need to understand that people are clueless. And if we know something, we should speak up because life is worth speaking into.
So I find myself talking a lot about these issues and not really discussing the issues with my kids as if this is something that they're dealing with. For some parents, vaping isn't an issue. It's not really an issue in our house. It's not something that we've kind of come into. But sometimes I'm finding that they have ideas about these topics that they might not have come up with. Somebody's giving them these thoughts or these processes or viewing these different issues in a certain light. So when that happens, especially with issues like vaping, how can parents approach talking about these topics, knowing that their kids might not be struggling with it, but their kids might not be thinking well about it? How can we have those conversations without really alienating our children or creating sides where their kids and all of their friends stand on one side of the group and the parents on the other side trying to defend a perspective or a viewpoint? How can we have conversations like this without alienating people?
That's an excellent question because there's no one listening who would want to alienate a child or a grandchild. So that's a really important perspective. The first thing I think of is to listen longer. Our children and our grandchildren, even our students, are less likely to listen to us if they don't feel heard. So don't be afraid of their ideas. Don't be afraid of their perspective. You have the standing truth. You know what's legal, illegal. You can report data on the dangerous health, longevity issues. Maybe you even know someone who vaped for a while or did cannabis for a while, and now they regret that season of life. And you invite that person over for lunch or dinner and let your kid hear from the expert, if you will, about why they think that it would be good to stop using that. So involving others is really smart. No parent will be the only expert children listen to. There's a season in life when most teenagers and young adults are looking for others to turn to, not necessarily instead of mom and dad, but to find out, do others agree with my mom and dad? Are my mom and dad really weird? Or do my friends' parents think the same thing? Does my soccer coach think the same thing? So don't be afraid if they seek others out and maybe even create that environment where they have a chance to talk among a variety of aged people about whether or not this thing you're talking about, whether it be vaping or something else, is healthy or not. And another thing that we all have to remember is we do not have to know everything in order to have a conversation. Now, do your work if you can. If you know that a best friend of one of your kids is vaping, get ready for the discussion. If you know that it has come up as a sermon illustration, get ready. If you know that it came up in a school situation because some kids were caught vaping, out in the hallway or down the hall or whatever, it's probably going to come up. Either your kid's going to experiment or your kid's going to say, what's the big deal? And so get ready, do some research, talk to some friends, and have some vocabulary ready so that you can have the conversation. But you know what? You can learn with your kids. You can listen to a TED Talk with your kids. Now, here's where you discern who to listen to. And you make sure that you're listening to or you're reading off of a web-oriented site that has the perspective that, of course, you agree with or you believe in, so that your children are getting the truth that you want them to get. Don't be afraid of the tough conversation. Get ready for it.
Yeah, that's really important. And I think it leads into my final question on this one, because these conversations end up being really like a psychological exercise. It's like we're in a TV sitcom of all of these different things that are weaving together, and we're trying to put pins in them. And we don't really have time or energy oftentimes to engage the chess match with our kids, right? So we end up engaging or maybe picking our battles and saying, is that a battle I should fight or is that a battle I shouldn't fight? But I think a lot of times these conversations, more than addressing the issue, I've had some mentorship that kind of have taught me this, that a lot of times you're building muscles with the kids on how to process things or think through things. And so an issue that they're really tightly holding today might not be an issue they tightly hold tomorrow, but the ability for them to discuss it and process it builds muscles for that. So as we're having these conversations, I'd love to hear you speak to specifically maybe some of the core needs or these core ideas that we should tackle when we're having hard conversations like this to help kids build muscles so that they're not just argumentative, but they also feel like they have some core needs met or they build those muscles for meeting those core needs as they're processing ideas. So I'd love to hear you speak to that. What are core needs that kids have that as we engage these topics, we should affirm and help them build those stronger?
The first core need all of us have is a need for security, which we define as people you can trust. Who can I trust? So to show your children that you're teachable, to show your children that you're open to perspectives, to show them the journal article you read, or to share a clip off of a really good news station that was talking about the dangers of vaping or whatever, and show them that and listen as a family. Let them know that you care so much about them that you're going to learn about the things that you never thought you would have to even engage with. And then you have the tough conversations. And I think that security is key. I think learning cause-effect thinking, as part of our competence, what do I do well? Can I trust myself to reason? Can I trust myself to come up with truth as a conclusion? I can if I'm thinking cause-effect with the biblical worldview, that I'm not going to compromise. I think the kind of thinking we do is very, very important. Belonging. We can walk away from a conversation and disagree, and we're still parent and child. We're still husband and wife. We're still siblings. Doesn't mean I'm going to give up. Doesn't mean I'm not going to try to persuade you another conversation that I'm right, you're wrong. if I feel like it's a life and death kind of issue. But I think in our families, if we can figure out when to learn to push and when to step back, when to agree to disagree, and when we say to our kids, hey, I'll agree to disagree for right now because we've been talking a long time and it's late, but you just understand that I am not convinced. So we'll come back and deal with this, and let your kids go find more data to support them, and you go find data that supports your viewpoint.
You know, this encouragement from Dr. Kathy that we received today is really important. I think it's really important because many times the battles that we engage in conversation aren't really over a matter, but they're over an idea that we would understand that society is fighting for the hearts and minds of our students. And at the same time, God is offering to our students an incredibly beautiful story. And rather than impose God's view and story onto our students, we many times have the privilege of proposing to them that this beauty that God is calling them to is something that is really otherworldly. The current world cannot encapsulate the beauty that God is calling our students to. And yet, society tells narratives, and many students get bought into those narratives and end up walking down paths that lead to challenges and incredible hardships. But it's something that I believe that James is talking about. In James chapter 3, beginning at verse 13, and this is what James writes: "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness." For many times, parents, we battle with this presenting our students as if they're some kind of presentation of the grace of God that's at work in our lives. And instead, what we find is that God has given us these students to be able to propose the opportunity of God's beautiful story for them. So we can't harbor bitter envy or selfish ambition in our hearts, that we fight for these realities that somehow the world has captivated us by as parents. But instead, we have this opportunity that God has given us with wisdom to give them peace, to give them consideration, to give them a spirit full of mercy and good fruit that is sincere, that wants to have them have peace in their lives as they stand before God. And that's an incredible light that shines through the darkest times. And may God gird you up for that as you face another week with students that are all around you. But we hope that you know that, knowing that there's a whole team of us here at Celebrate Kids that are praying for you and giving you encouragement as you face these dark moments. If you've received any encouragement from us at Celebrate Kids, we'd love to hear some feedback on that. Leave a review on your favorite podcast app, or go ahead and send us an email at ask@ignitethefamily.com. Those things are just great encouragement for us as we continue to give you hope, courage, and peace as you're facing dark times. For Dr. Kathy and the rest of us at Celebrate Kids, I want to say thanks for listening with us today, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.